What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome to my first review in 2025. I was very happy to be sent over an early screener for the film we're going to be talking about today. So let's get into it. This film is called The Prosecutor. Directed by Donnie Yen and Ho-Pong, this film is written by Edmund Wong and also stars Donnie Yen as well as Francis Ng, Cheng, and many more. And before we get too far into this video, I want to say a big thanks to all of you guys for taking the time out of your day to hear my thoughts on The Prosecutor. If you're new to the channel and you like early reviews for movies like this, or up-to-date reviews, retrospective reviews, live streams, and the occasional vlog, then you're in the right place and you should consider subscribing. But if you're a returning viewer, well, thank you so much for coming back. I really appreciate it. And I want to say one last big thanks to Well Go USA Entertainment, who sent me over an early screener for this one. The Prosecutor is a film that actually released in the tail end of 2024 in China, but will be releasing this week on January 10th in the States. So they sent me over an early screener to check it out. And when I saw Donnie Yen on the poster, I was incredibly excited. Donnie Yen is one of those actors that whether his films are good or not, you know exactly what you're going to get, which is some badass action. And with him in the director's chair in this film, I was definitely excited, as well as him being the main star of the film. Now, before we get into my personal thoughts on the film, let's get into what this movie is all about. The movie focuses on Donnie Yen, who is a former police officer who's now become a prosecutor at the Department of Justice. He doesn't really like the way that justice works. He feels like on the front lines he was able to capture criminals, but keeping them in jail, keeping them in prison, or making sure that they get sentenced wasn't necessarily something that was happening. So he becomes the prosecutor so he can kind of be that last line of defense and starts to rub people the wrong way as he takes his job very, very seriously, and he wants to do everything he can to prove the innocence, specifically of one young individual who's been tricked to going into a guilty plea and is now serving time for a crime that he did not commit that specifically has to do with drug trafficking. Over the course of the film, he starts to uncover some things that have to do with the drug trafficking going on in China in this area and a big drug trafficking ring that is behind it all. And he has to protect a couple of individuals who are kind of in the crosshairs of these drug traffickers. And that's the basic gist of the film without getting too far into it. Again, like I said before, going into a film like this, you know Donnie Yen is going to be badass. So I want to start this off by saying he is an absolute beast in this film. The action around him in this film is so good. Clearly inspired by things like John Wick, but very much playing off of the long history of badass martial arts combat that Donnie Yen is famous for. So if you're going into this movie looking forward to some really badass action sequences, well, you will not be disappointed because there's certainly a lot of them over the course of the film, and Donnie Yen is phenomenal in all of them. He just consistently, even in his older years, is giving out top tier combat when it comes down to the choreography, which the camera work really goes hand in hand with. When it comes down to his physicality, he's just so quick, so fast paced. The action is really badass and very well thought out, and was without a doubt my favorite part of this movie. Outside of all of that, I have to be honest in saying that I thought that the film was fairly generic on a story and character level. Donnie Yen's character is easily the one that you can root for the most. He's this character that has a lot of drive, and him working in law while also having been a police officer and kind of wanting to take the law into his own hands very much felt like this film was reminiscent of something like Daredevil and John Wick. There's even sequences in this film with a lot of neon lights that feel very much inspired by some of the more recent John Wick films. But yeah, overall, what I can say about this film on a narrative level is I thought that it was okay. I thought the performances were solid throughout for the most part. Nobody here is giving a riveting performance. I think Donnie Yen really stands out with the choreography and the action, and I think everybody else who's part of that action really helps to elevate these moments. I found myself kind of ebbing and flowing in terms of my entertainment of the film, though, because throughout the course of the film, when it comes down to the courtroom drama element, a lot of the logic behind it and some of the things that end up happening that get this innocent individual to go to jail is just so kind of silly that it just makes you kind of be like, how did something like this really happen? Like, how did this guy really end up getting in prison? How did all of this end up happening with this drug ring to eventually lead to this kind of being a consistent thing that's happening? There is a little bit of logic loopholes that you kind of have to dive through for the narrative of this film. But outside of that, I also felt that the narrative in general was fairly generic. I didn't really feel like it ever kind of elevated the material, and I found myself in a place where I was getting to the action sequences and I was fully back on board. I was completely enamored with what was going on. I was like, okay, this movie is badass. And then you spend another 15-20 minutes until the next action sequence in these courtroom, sequences and, kind of building off the story. And it's all entertaining enough. I won't say I was bored while watching it. I can't say it was a bad film, but there was nothing about it that I feel ever elevated elevated it to being a really top tier movie on a narrative level. This is a film that for me solely worked when it came down to Donnie Yen and the action. And I will say the last final few action sequences of this film are just so awesome that it kind of almost makes you forget that the story around it is just fairly generic. There's no other way to put it. Another thing also, I don't know if it was just the copy that I got, and it's possible that this will change with various copies that will release later on. As somebody who watches a lot of foreign cinema, specifically even things like anime, and I watch a lot of things with subtitles, and I am a pretty quick reader, there was quite a few moments in this film where there's a lot of characters speaking, or the characters are speaking fairly rapidly, and the subtitles were on and off screen so quickly where I had to backtrack a couple of times just to make sure I understood what the dialogue was saying, only because it kept feeling like it was flying off the screen so fast. Again, as somebody who watches a lot of anime and watches a lot of foreign cinema and is pretty used to reading subtitles fairly quickly, it just felt like a few times like I couldn't keep up with the subtitles because they were just popping on and off screen so fast. So again, I don't know if that's just, you know, maybe me. It could have been a skill issue this time around. Maybe I was a little tired while watching the film and my eyes just weren't keeping up, or maybe it was just that it was ever so slightly fast in the edit that I was personally sent, but I just thought it was at least something worth mentioning here. Overall, I think The Prosecutor is a film that's certainly worth your time if you're a fan of Donnie Yen and big over-the-top crazy choreographed action. But I will say, if you're going into this hoping for a really strong story, I don't necessarily know that you're going to get this. There are some nice touching moments in the movie for sure. There are some cool moments, but the villains are overly generic and one note. There's really nothing to them. You never really get a grip of who the villains are and really any sort of connection. There's a lot of side characters that the film tries to make you care about or kind of remember, but they're just so you know, kind of non-consequential that you find yourself kind of like, okay, what's the point of that character and why should I care about them? And then there's a couple story beats specifically around a character that is killed in the film that just felt like it was meant to feel more impactful, but isn't really nearly as impactful as it is. There's a lot of sequences like that over the course of the film, and by the time the movie was over, I was like, that was badass action-wise. That always kind of took the movie up to a 10 for me, but the story around it just couldn't be anything more than just something I've seen before done 100 times better in a million other things. But it was kind of cool to have a movie that is a mix between Daredevil and John Wick. So that's going to be my thoughts on The Prosecutor. I look forward to hearing various opinions on this one as it starts to roll out into the States and more people get to check it out. Again, a big thanks to the kind folks over at Well Go USA Entertainment for sending me over an early screener, and I look forward to hearing all of your guys' thoughts on The Prosecutor. Are you planning on checking it out? Are you not planning on checking it out? Whatever the case may be, leave any and all comments down below. And one other question I'll have for you guys: what is your favorite Donnie Yen film? I know the Ip Man films are going to definitely be on the top of most people's list, but maybe what's a Donnie Yen film that most people don't love, or maybe not one that is mentioned very often that you really enjoy? A big thanks to all of you guys for watching, and I'll see you beautiful people in the next one. Bye-bye.